Hello. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the Green Space. I'm Nancy May Seychow, and I am the Assistant Production Manager here. I'm very, very proud to be presenting the Penn World Voices Festival with you tonight. We do about 90 shows a year, so we do hope that after tonight you will be coming back to the space. Next week we kick off our round of events again. Q2 Music presents Bang on a Can All-Stars field recording album release on Wednesday, May 13th. And then following that show, we will have the Macropolis series, where we will be talking about race, poverty, and policy on Thursday, May 14th. Now, if you are interested in any of these shows or other things that we present here, tickets are available for these shows and many more at thegreenspace.org, and that is green with two E's, so GREENE, space.org. You can be the first to know of all the things that happen in this space by joining our newsletter, by liking us on Facebook, and also joining us on Twitter. Now, this is the time that I will be asking you to be mindful about your electronics. So if you have cell phones, please do put them on silent. You don't have to turn them off, because we would also ask you to join us on Twitter if you'd like, at The Green Space. And if you are taking any photography tonight, please do not use flash. Now, we are live streaming tonight's event, so if you would like to go back and watch this, it will be living on our website on demand, so you can watch the video again, share it with your friends, your family, your foes, whoever you'd like. Please do share. It lives on the website forever. And I think that covers all of that. Now, I am very, very happy to present Kim Chen, the General Manager of the Penn Festival. Come join me.
Hi, my name is Kim, and I just wanted to thank everyone for coming. You have on your chairs the festival brochure. We're at the beginning of a really exciting week of all sorts of events and discussions, and I know after tonight you're going to want to come back, so I hope to see you again and enjoy this evening. Thank you.
This is yours. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Hello. My name is Shireen Hassam. I am an academic and an author and an activist from Johannesburg, South Africa. I teach at the University of the Witwatersrand. And on behalf of the writers, the translators, and the editors of Penn, it's our great pleasure to welcome all of you here to the 11th Annual Penn World Voices Festival of International Literature. I would like to begin by thanking the sponsors, the supporters, and the volunteers of the festival, without whose support, of course, this entire event would not be possible. This festival, as you know, brings together writers from across the globe to explore timely subjects of our time, of our day, in art, politics, and personal life. And for the first time this year, Penn is focusing on a region, and it's a great delight for us that it is Africa that is being focused on, an area of the world that for some people was without history and remains seen to be a continent mired, particularly around these issues of queerness, to be mired in some kind of backward set of cultures. And I hope tonight we can explore the ways in which those of us who live on the continent experience it very differently, and experience it as a place of great creative energy and great possibility. So I hope that this evening's discussion will open up questions about personal and intimate life, about the choices that we are able to make, all of us in all parts of the world, not just Africa, but in particular, I think the set of challenges, that's a very South African word, the set of challenges that we face in South Africa. We have a great panel, beginning on that end with Binyavanga Wainaina, who is a writer and does not want to be called an activist, he says. He is a writer from Kenya. Binyavanga has spent time in many different countries on our continent, as well as time as director at the Bard Center, the Chinua Achebe Center for African Writers. Next to him, Zanele Moholi, one of Africa's most famous photographers now, I would say rapidly becoming a voice next to someone like William Kentridge as one of the greatest artists produced by South Africa. Zanele's photography at the moment is on show at the Brooklyn Museum, and I would urge you all to go and see it. She also has this book, Phases and Faces, which is shortlisted currently for a prize. And then right next to me from Nigeria, Kehinde Badamosi, who is also a writer, a blogger, a PR man, I think, and the son of a preacher, he says, who is currently finishing his memoir on growing up as a preacher's boy in Nigeria, and the kinds of difficulties that he's faced. So a panel of homies from South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, people who I think are at the cutting edge of a lot of thinking about queerness in Africa, and a really fitting panel to talk about queer futures. So I want to open up this conversation by talking about the project of publicity, the idea that speaking out about our sexualities in the public sphere is politically necessary in our time. This is an interesting question for us in the African context because it takes us into a new phase of politics that is different from the era when silence itself was seen as strategic. Sylvia Tamale, who is somebody you may all have heard of, a lawyer, an academic, the leading force behind stopping the anti-homosexuality bill in Uganda, she's argued in her work that silence can be as empowering as speech, and in fact is a mode of empowerment that's particularly African, she says, around issues of sexuality. She says, it is this powerful political mode because it constitutes a refusal to talk about black sexualities on the terms of colonialism. So she's always argued for thinking differently about silence. But it seems to me that now we are in a bit of a different mode. And I wondered how you would respond to the idea that there's much more self-confident engagement of publics, not just the publics in which we feel safe, but also the publics in which we feel unsafe on the continent, and that in a way each of you have been at the cutting edge of engaging the public sphere. Zanele, you've long been involved in the project of visibility, and photography, of course, lends itself as a medium to that project. And you said in the past that silence is not an option for you, that speaking out about crimes against particularly black queer women in South Africa hurts you, but that you would rather die knowing that you spoke out than remained in silence. Binyavanga, you have written in that wonderful cultural magazine Chimurenga, something people should look at. In Chimurenga, you named yourself as a homosexual. You made it that powerful essay that went viral across our continent, touched many lives. It sort of opened up a conversation that hadn't, I think, been easy for many young people before. And Kehinde, you too, in your social media platform, are aiming at creating conversations about gay rights in spaces that are difficult for many people. So I wonder if you could perhaps begin to address this question of the way in which African publics are now much more engaged with questions of sexuality? Does visibility, do you think, marshal political power in ways that it didn't before? Have we dented this perception that it's only among African elites that you can talk about sexualities? I think that is a perception. It's not been true. We know that living on the continent that it has been talked about. We know it has been. But does this new project of engaging publics through new media, through photography, through writing, change the political space? Binyavanga, I'll start with you.
Cool. Of course, Africa is a big and complicated continent. I'll say one of the most refreshing things, because like I feel sometimes as a gay person, like I'm 16 years old, because it took me like until my 30s to even engage with myself about it. And now you go to these club balconies in Nairobi, where queers have started to negotiate their own terms of engagement. There was a club which was fairly open in downtown, where a lot of classes mix, in Nairobi. And so one time the owner decided to ban gays. He's like, all you gay people are causing trouble here. And so gays boycotted the club. And it shut down. And he came begging, and it shut down. So somewhere in the club scene of town, the word must have gone around that this is not good for our business. And so you now have these balconies which are queer. And the chemistries of younger generations I find them really fascinating in Nairobi, because if there was the time you had these really controlled upper middle class spaces where there were so many expatriates and they could have a kind of a queer night, and because you have a lot of white people jumping inside that queer night, you could camp it up to some degree, no kissing, and then other queers could come in and fit in there and from the wrong side of town, and nobody will bother you, because Kenya remains very dedicated to making sure tourists and expatriates are very well taken care of, and so on and so forth. Now, there's a particular club, because we are streaming live, I'm like, let me not say the name. There's a club, and it's the blurring of gay and straight has just happened. So mostly inside, close to the bar, is mostly straight, kind of. But there are nights you go and you're like, what are all those people up to there? And then the sort of sports bar watching people seem completely unbothered about what's going on there, but they have to go outside to the balcony to smoke, which is as queer in every diverse way you can imagine, and not shy about not just kissing or everything and anything that you can imagine. Now, and it's fine. So for me, what I found in the last 10 years, what I've just found as remarkable, and talk less about, for now, about policies and laws and whatever, which, is very well, and articulated and all these things that one works for, is how the spaces from below, they themselves are sort of finding firm ground and planting their feet inside in ways and ways that can't really be easily undone. I met this young man, sent me a text message about 4 years ago, and he's like, "Oh, I'm coming to your town." And he said, "I'm coming to your town." So he texts me and we meet. So he's like, "Listen, I come from a village about 50 kilometers away from Eldoret, in a sort of area that is known to be quite homophobic, or that the reactions will be a bit extreme to any mention of the word that one sex and another sex ever did anything to each other." And so he's like, so I'm like, "So how did you?" He's like, "I didn't even know that there was a thing called homosexuality and everything else, but I really liked fat men." Like the headmaster, and I didn't know what to do with that information, and so on and so forth. And so he ended up in Eldoret, which is the near big town, and he was there, and he went online, And he didn't know all these usual social media and websites that many Africans know. He was like, I didn't even know they existed. So he kept hitting paywalls and being told, put your credit card details here. And he's like, he couldn't figure it out. Anyway, long and short is that somehow, I call it the bright digital light. It has its own problems with what it brings, that bright digital light, manages to find people to find their micro communities in so many intense and specific ways that give you that security, I think to some degree has already fully happened. Which maybe one can call coming out or visibility, you know. But that last 10 step that you would never take and say, you know, I'm leaving here, or I'm reaching out and sending a message or an awkward thing to that person, and I've diligently searched, pre-researched, twirled around that person, because that's usually what happens, is that people go peeping in your Facebook, and then they're peeping around and everything else, and then they send a message going, hi. You know, and so things like that, yeah. So that, I think that my point about it is that on the level of 10 years ago, where these things were meeting at a head and the nation was in the capital and it was being argued in Kampala or Lagos or whatever, this sort of, in a continent that is innately so diverse, and diverse, I want to say not New York diverse, upon which many different colors and types and textures of people meet on a common subway of arrangements, you understand? I'm talking about where the subway of arrangements, there are these people there are 46 who speak that language. There are those ones who are 25 million who speak that language. And then they're all squashed into a nation state. And then there are people who speak multiple like this across that kind of diversity where even the platforms that carry you are not. There's something in the idea of emergence and Africanness which these sorts of micro technologies suit almost better than anywhere at any time in history. And I think it's really exciting that that's where these things get picked up in these ways so well. Yeah.
I mean, it's also interesting, though, what you say about the bright light of visibility, that in some parts of Africa, we've experienced that as positively enabling, and I'll come to that in a minute, Zanele, in terms of some of the experiences in South Africa, but in others, as in Uganda, the bright light of visibility and that public sphere of the law was used, in fact, to regulate us in ways that were repressive, and that without the law, in fact, people existed in much safer spaces than when attempts to create laws were begun, right, in the last 10 years under the supposed banner of democracy. So I think that's something we could explore, the notion of publicity and the extent to which it is as liberating as we sometimes imagine it to be. But Zanele, you've worked precisely to bring to awareness how having laws in place is not enough to protect people from hate crimes. I wonder if you could say something about your work and the work of photography around this visibilizing of sexualities in the public sphere.
Sometimes visibility is good, but also at the same time, visibility can be risky for many people, especially in the townships where most of us grew up, and also from spaces where you think that you're protected the most. You find that a lot of people have been hurt and other people were murdered simply because of being in different spaces. We have took, visibility to the streets of Johannesburg, Durban, Cape Town. We marched, we held placards, we made sure that our government heard our voices and we needed to be attended to, as a matter of fact. But I realized that was not the same for everybody. Other people understood by using different visual codes in which one had to speak, on. So I just used visual activism as a means of speaking my truths and those who were around me. And in my headspace, as I did that, I thought, speaking of Africa or speaking of South Africa, we're speaking of visibility in terms of languages, because we can't just assume that visibility comes as English as how it's challenged by our leaders when they said it's an African to be queer because we don't have language for it. Speaking as a Zulu person and rethinking of the number of languages that are spoken in our countries, from Kenya to South Africa, we have 11 official languages. So how then do you make sure that everybody understand without having to depend on, academic terminologies that are there, which are mostly, written in English? How do we make sure that everybody has a sense of who they are, that it's okay for you to be Zulu, to be Xhosa, without modernizing your whole self and putting on a different kind of costume that will then make you foreign within your space where you know for sure that you're homosexual. Can I be a Zulu female being and walk, bare-breasted in public just like Zulu maidens and reclaim my citizenship and my tribe, Can I be a full Xhosa woman and practice traditions that are there to be, So we have to think in so many ways when we're thinking about what is visibility and what languages do we use, and do not only use just one form when we're talking about visibility. So I use visuals to write about our immediate spaces, to challenge the status quo. Because when people say, what is a lesbian, what is a homosexual, where do you find these homosexuals, et cetera, et cetera? And coming from South Africa, internet is not as fast as here. Unlike most gay boys, we don't cruise easily. And maybe the format is easier for the guys because they know exactly what to do. I was saying to someone the other day that, I don't know, we don't have any guidelines on how to make love maybe to women, whereas boys just do it, So your gay bars are not my cup of tea. But they are relevant also at the same time because that's where people meet. Yeah. And I was thinking of how people use letters and telegrams, and now we are at the digital age where we use Twitter, and it's so easy to flirt and move with the flow.
We're going to see something in a minute, but I just want to ask you before you move to that when you founded the organization, the Forum for the Empowerment of Women, you also made a very specific political move to not just put lesbianism on the table, but to name Black lesbianism as a space of identity that was under attack in a particular kind of way. And it's that organization, the Forum for the Empowerment of Women, and Inkanyiso and a few others that you've been involved in, the 1 in 9 campaign, for example, have to some extent, I think, shattered the idea that the constitutional gains in 1996 in South Africa have been equally enjoyed by all queers in South Africa. Do you want to say something about that before you move to your images?
Before I show the short piece, I think I don't know if, to be fair, maybe to give Kane the chance to respond to the question and then...
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, there's a segue of the digital media generation. I mean, I just came to America some few months back, and I've been doing some research with Baltimore gay men. I've been doing a lot of talk with them, especially the Black men who are gay in Baltimore. You found out that I did a survey with about 864 Black men, and I found out that out of 864 Black men, just about 12% of them would be representative online. Would show up their profiles on social media. Most of them are anonymous. Most of them will want to hide themselves. Now, this is America where there is protection for you. If you are gay, you're not going to be persecuted. But people are still hiding because of what? Now, there is something we call the cultural element to this. And I think no matter what we do, even in the digital space, people are still going to respect culture, which is something we need to really talk about as we talk about activism and silence and, being visible. This is America where there is a lot of freedom, but only 12% Black gay men would be representative, would come online, with their real pictures. Because I've been doing this survey, using all the gay websites and all of that. And I found that compared to white counterparts, the black gay men in America are still not visible. And this is America. So I think as we talk about Africa, we should also reflect on what's happening here. Look at the Black Lives Matters and all of that. I think there's a lot going on with the black man, and we need to contextualize this conversation, not just about Africa, it's about the culture, of shame and silence. These things that have brought us to this place where we are. So I think these are things I want us to look at as we begin to get into this topic.
Right, and of course, large parts of this country, which not only for black queer people, but white queer people as well, don't feel safe. It seems from reading it from the outside. So, in Nigeria, for example, do you think that there is more of an openness and a possibility of talking about sexualities in the public sphere? Do you think
Nigeria
that
comes as the second highest homophobic country, according to Pew Research recently? In Africa, they survey about 45 countries, and Nigeria happened to be the second highest, with about 90-something% who claim that they don't want homosexuals. And remember that when the bill was passed to law, January last year, 2014, remember it was a Christmas gift. They said this was a Christmas gift to the nation because the people wanted to jail the gay people.
Right.
So they are excited. You remember the story of the thieves on the right side of Jesus, and and these people were like, these are sacrifices to be made. And Jesus was part of that. So the homosexuals in Nigeria are the sacrificial lambs, for bad governors, for corrupt, governors, and all of that. We are the ones that are the problem, not the terrorists. We are the ones who are the problem, not the people who are stealing the country blind. We are the ones who are the problem because we are homosexuals. So anything wrong that goes wrong, like in America today, they still talk about it when there's tsunami, and people say it's homosexuals. Isn't it?
Yeah, no,
so
absolutely.
sometimes I think we...
And feminists.
Yes, So a lot of time, this is a universal thing. I used to talk about it as African problem until I moved here. But I used to think there was a lot of problem with us in Africa. But when I got here, I found out that this is a human problem. It's something human about this, where we try to hide behind the mask, and blame other people for whatever predicaments we are facing.
Right. And do you think that these insights from Baltimore that you're talking about are a sign of the extent to which young people are feeling as if public spaces are spaces in which to be black is to be marked, and so adding another layer to that of an identity that is problematic just reinforces their sense of vulnerability.
Yeah, if you've been to Baltimore recently, you see most of the homes are boarded up, and that's the 2015 in America. You see most of the homes are boarded up. I mean, I live right in the community where most of these black people don't have transportation. We live in a place where we do not have public space, like park, where to play. So these kids, they go in, they also have curfew. Forget about the curfew that was recently out. There's always been curfew in Baltimore for black kids. I don't want to say for everyone, because these are really happening in places where you have these black kids. So there are a lot of, issues going around these people. They don't want to add homosexuality to that. So go to a typical barber's shop, which is one of the places where I conducted my survey. A typical barber's shop, once you come in, you need to remove your homosexuality before you come in. You need to put it at the door. Because this is a black man's space. And as black men, what do we listen to? We listen to hip hop, we listen to rap music, and all of this, they fetishize, the black male as that tough, strong, And so anything homosexual, makes you look like you're losing the fight against the supremacist. You're losing the fight against, so it is a whole lot of complex social problem. And I think the earlier we realize that, we'll be able to address the right thing, we'll be able to leverage the right systems.
Yeah.
So it is a cultural problem. It's not just, Nigerian, Kenya, it is a universal problem.
I suppose one of the big problems in the post-colonial condition is the extent to which heterosexuality, and particularly the notion of a kind of patriarchal family with a man at the head of the household and women as the nurturing, caring reproducers of the nation remains so central in that post-colonial project. And so, for example, Zanele, your photography completely challenges that kind of virtuous subject, female subject of the nation, right? Which is partly why the response is so violent, both the official response as well as the on the ground, in the street response to black queer women.
I think people are taken by surprise when they're seeing a person who is, I try to do away with the word woman because people think we're disempowered. I always use the female-bodied person, being human being for a reason. When you take on the tools for production and you produce work that then counts to history that challenges everything that is there to be. I grew up in a space where men carried cameras and they were capable of shooting. So when I realized that really photography had no gender, I had to do it well. Because if Pinyavanga's face is on the wall, I've maybe shot that image same like how a guy would take those images, same like a straight person or a gay person could do the same. So I just wanted to make sure that we had visuals that spoke to us or that speaks to us currently, because I was tired of lack of images that spoke to me as a person who was out and who was living or who is living as a black lesbian. Like I said, I find it a little bit easier for gays, because like Kehinda, the study that he's doing, he's brave to be doing that and even say, mention the other side of America, because for most people that come from home, they want to be in America. They wish to be in America as if we don't have really nothing back at home. So when they hear these words, they'll be so disappointed, because it's been like somebody is stopping us from getting to America without thinking that Americans have their own challenges too, especially black people in this country at the height of racism in America. So I had to work just like any other person, and I have to train people to become photographers. What you had or what you have in your library at school was produced maybe 20 years ago or 30 years ago. We need to produce the current that will speak to the future. If we talk of like queers in space, it talks about this generation of ours. And then there are queer born frees in South Africa, those who are born in the 90s, whose vernac or way of doing things is different. So it means that whatever productions from videos to photographs will always be different than the image that you had, which was produced in the 60s, 70s under apartheid South Africa. And most of the work that's been produced of black people in Africa was never, documented by us. So we have a duty or a responsibility as human beings to claim our rights. It means that we need to be relevant.
Right.
And unfortunately, most artists are not taken serious. And from the funding that came to South Africa, I don't remember much that was channeled towards black queer artists. There was a lot of funding that was given to Africans to produce, which focuses on HIV/AIDS, which focuses on pride, which focuses on other things. But when you say, talking of South Africa, 21 years of democracy, as I'm seated here, you have less books than books that comes from Kenya and other parts, in such a way that there are people from outside who know more of South African queer history than us, who are informants in people's research.
Yes.
which pains me the most. That's why I keep on echoing the need for the language, to say that if we use our own languages, respecting Anglophone, etc., we'll be moving towards the right direction, because visibility basically means that people need to be able to read and write and visualize their daily experiences. Right now, we don't have enough queer content that speaks to the Africans in their own languages. I don't know why do people think that we have to write in English, really, in as much as English is important. I'm a Zulu-speaking person. When you go to Zimbabwe, there are Shona people, there are Ndebele people. And if we were to use those languages, I think we'll be challenging our family members who think that we're adopting this thing from the West.
On the outside, yeah.
So there's a need to write queer terms, terminologies in our own vernac to challenge the un-African homosexuality or transgenderism in space. That's my frustration. We say photography is universal, but my intentions with photography might not be the same like another queer person who comes from Kenya, another person who comes from Uganda. And it meant that it took me a long period to maneuver the spaces and get it right.
Mm-hmm.
What you see at museums, at galleries, doesn't speak to many queers. And even that thinking around curators, giving us the space to showcase, you have to think that people have their own personal beliefs. Some people pray. I go to church. I'm next to pastor. And even thinking of like the art spaces curated by decent straight people, those curators are risking their jobs, because it means that the whole department need to have a long meeting just to negotiate whether you need to have black, nude, black lesbian images with their naked selves there, you know? And it's a negotiation that is tiring, because you're thinking to yourself, when will I ever be free? With the boys, they had Mapplethorpe, who produced amazing photography, where each time I look at those images, when I look at Rotimi Fanigayote's work, and I wish for 2 minutes to be gay for a day. Because as a lesbian, I was thinking, showcasing images of black female bodies with their boobs and their butts in ways that I won't be, termed a controversial black lesbian photographer would have been something else. So it has not been easy for me, because I had to deal with censorship in every other way. And even from the feminists that I trusted, that they understood the politics of Audre Lorde, So it has not been an easy journey. We do not have books and images that speaks to us. Accessibility is still a challenge. I've been lucky, but then it has not been an easy journey.
I think that's really raising a central sort of firewall in this debate about sexualities, that we've had to encounter this long period of coloniality in which black bodies were written about through a particular gaze, and to imagine talking about sexuality in a way that dismantles that entire edifice is the task of the moment. And part of it is creating the new archives that you're all involved in doing. And another part of it is uncovering repressed archives that are only available if you speak a multiplicity of languages, if you have this deep, I would say, Kahinde, probably cultural knowledge, right? In the good way, in the sense of knowing what the metaphors and the allusions are in our songs and our poetry and our initiation practices and our rites of passage into adulthood. This knowledge that is present within our communities, but which was almost kept separate in order not to be made available for these colonial uses, is what we're now doing. We're building, and I think it's quite exciting. Do you think Zanele is right that it's easier for queer men than for women?
No,
Binyavanga?
no, I'm most certain it's right. I mean, it's not a competition to the the first one to reach the barrier line. And because you have the double whammy of being a woman in the world and and a queer woman, and there's no way to kind of run around that, all the structural and other challenges that faces. But I'm caught very much by this. I mean, when Zanella and I spoke a while ago about this thing of the archive, which when she was explaining to me, I kind of was getting it. It was on Skype, and I was like, and I've been downloading what she said, and especially now, even the question of African languages. The state is weak in Africa because the state is fake. It's just it's no one's secret. So on one hand, there's all this bearing to all these spreads of laws and things. It's not that they did it in a committee meeting, and of course it was the cut and paste from the India law, the British. All of this happens, but the truth is, almost everybody knows. And on the other hand, that it's not just a reaction to corruption. I agree. It's a visceral reaction to the fact that they know that it itself was illegitimate.
Yes.
And that they now don't have a way to even the control, which was tenuous, over people's activities, over people's imagination, over people's language too, which is it's a political issue, itself is imploding. And inside that implosion, there are all these opportunities to create these small possible utopias inside this future. And that's why the idea of starting to build these archives, it's riper than ever because people are ready for it beyond understanding. I almost feel like the contract became, at independence, people were like, I don't know what this whole independence thing is, because I didn't contract anyway with a colonial master. Even that guy across from my country to the other side, I didn't even know of his existence. And then you went to school and you're like, oh, that's your cousin from the map. You understand what I'm trying to say. So you're like, okay, you can be my cousin, even though I really don't know you and everything else. And then everyone says, put everything you came with from home in a box, lock that box, and then come and perform Kenyanness or Zimbabweanness, and then I come online and, you find the vice president has said something, and then you're like, Kenyans, let's protest. And you try and imagine what it is. To me, it's just a transaction. We made a deal to figure it out. We're like, okay, we were given independence, and you're like, okay, let's spend some time figuring this thing out, before we know what questions to ask. And in the last decade and 15 years, most certainly, in sometimes extremely violent ways, in many, many eruptive ways, people are now asking. And in a certain sense, at the dead center, queers are asking. And one of the reasons that those responses are coming unpreempted is because they know that their thing has gone. It's gone. And so I find myself in this kind of cracks of a very beautiful moment. And for me, the front of the beauty becomes work like Zanella is doing, with just no question at all. When I first encountered that work online, I was like, oh, no. It's not possible. Yeah. And it is to make what 5 years ago I thought was physically impossible to do. And then when you go and look at the photographs, you're like, oh, that just now looks normal. But then the efforts that's being exerted to make sure that those archives are there. Cheers to you, Zanella.
Kehinde, you spoke about culture, but what about religion as part of what repressed the archive, right, in Africa? Do you think there's a possibility that we might implicate religion in a much more liberatory project now?
Is it possible for you to talk about religion without culture? No. Think about it. Literature, the movement, how literature came, how we have the modern literature, Africa. We remember the Islam movement, when they tried to teach people the religion, and then they were writing about it. We remember the Christianity, when the Christian movement, when they came in, and how they were using their religion to teach us how to read and write. So today, and this is to your point, the issue of language that we use. I'm always concerned about who is telling the story. Who tells the story controls the language.
Yes.
So if you look at Africa, most of the stories that have been told to us are taken from the Bible, and this language is the language of oppressors. And these are the language against women. These are language that say, and God created man in his image.
Right.
What about women? And then the next thing he said that God took women out of the man's rib. Think about it. See, today, until these things are changed, until these languages, which I don't want to call religion, it is still part of culture that had been culture that are already outdated. But these things are still with us. Go to Africa today, in every hotel, in most of Africa, I don't know about your place, you would find Bibles in the hotel. You will find small Bibles just by your bedside.
Lots of parts of the world.
Oh,
That's
yes,
still
it
true,
is.
yes.
It is amazing. And then here in America, most of these Pentecostal churches who are filled here, they now transport, all of this energy to Africa. Now, what we try to say is that let's change this language. Let's tell our stories. And that's why she's doing a heroic work of telling the stories of these women in the language of the people. Until the West realizes that we need to give African people the voice, to even Black American people. One of the major problems we are having here is because they are not telling their stories. I'm in Baltimore. Every day I'm trying to capture beautiful stories of Black men who take their children to school, who play with their children. I'm like, these stories are not told. What we hear are Black men who are being, who are criminals and all of that. I attend a school that is very, you want to say one of the top schools in America. I almost said in Nigeria. Okay. And I realized that every time they send us security warnings, they always code it like, oh, there are some Black men that are moving around the campus. And I challenged the security, I challenged the school administration. I said, why do you always put the color Black in your emails to us? These are storytellers. Every letters, every magazine we see, every newspaper we see are stories that are shaping us. So let's not call religion into this. It is the stories that are being told over and over again, and that's what we need to change it. We need to let our people tell their stories so we can change this language. So it's a language of oppression, and religion is just one excuse that we can use for it.
I think we could talk quite a lot about the examples of the ways in which people are telling their own stories and fighting attempts by various forces, using laws, using the state to suppress all forms of identities. We could tell lots of stories about how this sort of savior complex is shaping some of the politics in Africa, and how people themselves, in fact, are taking politics into their own hands and stopping bills like the anti-homosexuality bill, right? A major example of a successful, thriving civil society inside Uganda that didn't rely on an external savior. But we are running out of time, and I do want to keep some time for questions from the audience. I wonder if we could maybe segue to those questions, though, by showing some of Zanele's images or her little documentary first, and then open up for Q&A. Zanele, do you want to tell us what we're about to see?
What's about to see is a documentary in which I collaborated with Human Rights Watch. I work a lot with organizations, even though I'm not fixated in one space. It's called We Live in Fear. We published it, or it was released in 2013, just to give you some glimpse of what exactly do I do and how I do it, with who I do it, and when. And yeah, just to give some context for those who have not seen my other side. Yeah, thank you. I will be there. Just forevermore. There's a special star that shines every evening in your eyes. Special star that shines. It's gonna hit a lullaby. Special song, put Vaseline. Good. I'm Zanel Mholi, reporting live from South Africa. I'm a visual activist. I take photographs. The kind of work that I do is on queer politics, gender politics, politics of race. I'm fascinated by LGBTI individuals in different spaces. I've learned how beautiful this place is, how important our lives are, and why we should preserve a history about our own people, about us. Very, very interesting township. I've done a lot of shots here. I shot the first gay wedding here in 2002. I don't even know that there are lesbians who own dogs. This is for the first time that I know someone who owns a dog. The light is good here. Yeah. I'm going to shoot a follow-up portrait of Tumi Imohokila. I used to be a hairstylist. Really? Yeah. We had a life before we came out. Somebody asked me how influential am I when it comes to this portrait. And I said to people, I just want people to look good. Oh. I really, really want people to be fresh. We're going to Limpopo Pride.
I'm coming. When I read the address.
We're connected by photography. I was doing photo shoot here in Guatemala, and I thought that she was just a very nice person to be in the Faces and Phases series that I'm working on. You have young generation that is growing up now who doesn't share maybe the same, commonalities like lesbians who were out there in the 90s or late 80s before South Africa gained independence. The young lesbians now, they are socialites, connected by the social medias and all of that, and they're free when it comes to photographs, etc., etc. I know maybe some people get surprised when you start photographing.
I was surprised, but at the same time it was fun. I had fun and I didn't know that I'm photogenic. So since then, I like to take myself pictures.
So this is 3 years later. We are in the same township, and the township is so popular with
the killings.
With no gay lives. There are a lot of gay people in Guatemala. And also it has since become notorious for hate crimes because in 2008, a non-black lesbian was brutally murdered here. 2012 was one of the most painful years in our history. We lost a lot of members of our communities, and hate crimes, specifically curative rapes and lesbian murders, became one of the brutality that is stained in our brains forever. We live in fear. Death happened to bind us. Hate crimes have become a binding factor for the LGBTI communities. We come together to either give support or to confirm that somebody has been killed. Then that person becomes a statistic. Another case number becomes part of our history. And what are we doing about it? Do we always go and attend funerals, and then after funerals you go home, you wait for another funeral? What? You have to document. You are forced to document.
Transformation by
I don't only do
Transformation by Zanele Mholi.
No, by you, this is your head. I'm using visuals as a way of creating awareness, capturing the moments, those truths and realities the world will learn about our cultures. I could give you something tangible and say, feel it, this is it, see. You invited to be in that space even though you were not there. So look, let's breathe in and out. We're shooting faces and faces, not fashion. Yeah. There is the other side of me when I perform. There is the other side of me when I'm me. how will you engage with me? You look so gay, yeah? Actually, you look like a drag queen. Most of the time I work with people that I know. They're no strangers to me. I call the people who are in my photographs participants because you partake in a project that will inform many audiences.
And when it comes to these young lesbians you are teaching?
Any person who's interested in learning is welcome to learn how to take photographs. I provide cameras as long as a person will be able to document what will then become a contribution towards Inganyeso, which is the organization that I formed. One cannot do these major projects alone, which is why I invited people to come on board and work with me. And it means that it's not lonely anymore. Take 5. I started this project called Inganyeso to ensure that people who are featuring in my photographs get a platform to share their own lives and work. People get to read about sex, people get to read about anything that they will never, in as much as South Africa is so democratic, they'll never see that kind of text in the mainstream media. Most of the team members, we are black lesbians. Hello. People occupy different positions within the Inganyeso crew. Bongi is a documenter, and Lerato is a graduate. She's a journalist, and we just posted a new story on Pep Smear that she wrote this morning. Now I had to beg Lerato to cut that hair, and look how beautiful this person is. He did Lerato's portrait in 2010, so we're gonna have a nice follow-up shot. I train and I will continue to train with or without funding. Because if I wait for someone to validate my existence, it will mean that I'm shortchanging myself. Recently, we had to decide whether we buy a fridge where we live or we buy a new lens. So we sleep on the floor, it's nice, documenting with my crew, it's fabulous. I love the people that I work with. A lot of people are reading this Pep Smear thing.
For, lesbian or even butch women, it's something that's, if I don't know if I can say taboo. But I don't know, you said you need me to revise it.
No, you have to do part 2.
Part 2, what's
I
part 2
feel that
about?
you robbing the most. I don't think that you gave it your all, like how you write when you tackle the issues of hate crimes and other. What would you like to read about in the mainstream?
Not even read, even when seeing, I'd like to see an advert of a family where it's the mother and the baby, and they're fighting germs in the household. It shouldn't only be about the violence and the homophobia.
We want to bring about change in spaces that are queerphobic. We still have religious leaders who want to use homosexuality as scapegoat for their own hate. Instead of dealing with poverty, instead of dealing with the corrupted systems that we find ourselves in, and that's what leads to many hate crimes. See where there's white concrete wall? Is where Nokolo Nokwaza was found. Nokolo Nokwaza is a victim of hate crime who was brutally murdered. Her head was crushed with a big stone. Her teeth were all over the place. Nokolo Nokwaza's children are not the first to be orphaned by hate crimes. What will people say to the children what happened to their mothers? Nokolo's case is still outstanding. I don't know how far do they investigate these cases. We all document that lesbian funeral. Every person who has a cell phone with a camera, it doesn't matter what quality. And all of us come together in one space and download and share. You make that document viral. We want to say to our government, this is what I'm talking about when I talk of a lesbian funeral. It's my wish that we could find positive lesbian icons on Wikipedia as well, other than to always find brutal murders. You Google black lesbians in South Africa, you'll see what you see there. There's nothing that focuses on same-sex love versus these hate crimes. When do we start talking about intimacy? I produce pictures that are intimate because I'm an intimate being. This intimacy that disrupts the perpetrator leads to us being killed. It starts by the same-sex love that is disorganizing the mindset of the homophobe. more education is needed. Mainstream communities need to come on board and help us and ensure that there is no other hate crime. Projecting positivity sometimes can lead to the change. Projecting brutality and violations could lead to further violence. So I think that we need to find a balance in which we project these realities.
Let's go to the beach, eat, let's go get away. Say what they're gonna say.
Hello, beauty.
Inkanyiso is at Limpopo Pride 2013. I came with the Inkanyiso crew last night. Once we're done here, we're going to put it up on social networks to make sure that people who might not be here understand what is taking place and get the visuals. People think that pink cities are Cape Town, Durban, and Johannesburg. People cannot even imagine that there is Limpopo Pride. It's very important for us to say that LGBTI individuals are all over. Any space is possible. So we're here to celebrate with the people of this province. It's about saying, I want to be counted in South African history. Claiming my full citizenship, it means that I have to write that part of history.
Let's have it, DJ. Let's have the music there.
Sure. Thank you, Zanele.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up. There's mics on either side here if you want to come up to those mics. And please, can I ask you to say your name beforehand?
My name is Jim Forat. Those are such beautiful images. I just am blown away by the beauty of people, just people, our people. My question has to do with gender performance, identity, and authenticity. With social media being what it is this a new form of colonialization about how we're supposed to look no matter where we are, but within Africa? Are they taking on an image of homosexuality that they see, or is it something authentic in their own native or country tradition?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Who would like to? Kahinde, you want to have a go first?
It's fine. We could take another maybe question.
Yeah.
Or
Well, there isn't
response?
one at the moment, so
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the mobile penetration in Africa, especially right now, that everybody has a mobile phone. I think it's about 60-something% from the last count. You discover that there is a whole lot we can do with social media. I use the space of social media to engage with people because people don't really buy magazines and the books that we all read, but people can move things around to talk about their identity and all of that. I think it's a welcome thing. It's a good thing because now people are telling their own stories without being forced to listen to one single story like Shimamanda say about the danger of single story. I think it's something we should celebrate, that the social media, the digital social media is creating a space where we can have this new queer voice, identity, and people have that space without being edited, because a lot of time what you want to say, you can't say it when people have to censor what you have to say. But with mobile phones in people's hand, they can talk about who they are and they can pass it on. And I think that's what's causing a lot of revolution, even here in America. So if I get your question right, I think it's something we need to celebrate rather than looking at it as another set of wave or something that's just happening. It's not a sensation. It is necessary that people tell their own story. And I am for that. Yeah.
Semelia? Binyavanga, you want to say about performances of queerness? Are there new indigenous forms in which this is
Now, the point about it is we have to just come back to the simple question that the first thing to say is people have been living in Africa for 200,000 years as Homo sapiens in every manner of human ways of arranging themselves as possible. And so, no, there is no way to answer your question because do you understand what I try to mean? Because the question also wants to colonize it into that idea, and it can't be. You know, you can say the glimpses, where Zanele glimpses, the pieces of the glimpses. I can talk about the balcony of such and such, but I can't know. I think this, and again, coming even back again to the question of whatever the problems about the ownership of Twitter and which political party they belong to, and you know how Microsoft or somebody else or Citibank shall try and own each and every person and all of that. At the same time, you also have Black Lives Matters. So I think these are platforms. They're not in themselves revolutions. But I am very, very interested in the idea of the power of the black person in this world. And so where people are rushing and gushing through this to vault themselves into a place of power, yes.
I don't know about gender performativity. I don't know, it just disturbs me. But then I always think of before anything becomes performativity, before it's gendered, before it has a name and label, there's a human being, which is me, before the clothes, before any performance takes place. There's a somebody inside me before anything else. And then I'd say maybe people have been there before. People did not have the names, especially African people, where maybe I don't like to quote people when I talk, but I'll do it this time. Like Judith Butler is not my reality in that way, because African people had their own names and naming, and where we use oral histories and express ourselves before the academic terms and bombastics that we force to understand our gender and sexualities by referencing those experts. We have our own organic intellectuals that existed for so many years. Before performativity, before the costume, before anything else, the human being in you, in me, is queer.
Authentic.
Yes.
Yeah. Question.
So in terms of the
tell us
human...
your name?
Oh, sorry, I'm Busayo Lukwono. I'm from Nigeria. So this question might be very Nigerian specific, and I apologize, because I always try to make things as specific as possible when I talk about Africa, because they are just a multitude of cultures, and I think one mistake we make is we conflate them all. So I apologize if this question might be just directed to Kainde. So when she asked about religion, you said religion is a part of culture, and maybe dismissed it a little bit, I think, and I think in the case of Nigeria, it's actually a very dangerous thing to do, because there's sort of a charismatic Christianity in Nigeria, a charismatic Pentecostalism that I don't think has been received from Americans. I think it's actually quite within at least Yoruba culture. We are very, very, very Christian. So in terms of making the lives of queers in Nigeria better, is it impossible you have to engage religion? And is there a possibility of queer Nigerians and queer activists in Nigeria engaging with themes of Christianity? Because I think in order to advance the queer Nigerian project, you can't dismiss Christianity, because at the end of the day, at least Nigerian Christians are very, very Christian, and they're a huge percentage of the population. And I think even if you want to include Islam in that, you cannot dismiss Western faiths, because at the end of the day, the percentage of people who practice traditional Yoruba belief is quite small. And I come from my father is someone who's quite an expert in it, but it's a very small amount of people. So can you just talk a little bit about how perhaps we can engage with the themes in these books to actually improve the individual lives of queer people? Because I think there's a lot in that book that could actually further that project.
Thank you so much. I'm writing a book, which is my memoir that captures my journey as a preacher boy. I used to preach. I was with Foursquare Gospel Church, which used to be very big here in America, and we used to have a lot of revival meetings, raising the dead, healing people. I can't tell you how many dead we raised, but don't ask me. I want to say that there's some activists in Nigeria who have pioneered, the engagement with faith people, like Jide Macaulay. This is someone I look up to. He has done a lot of work trying to, but if you look at the way our belief system is, and that's why you thought I was dismissive about it. We are very fanatic when we take on something. Look at fashion, for instance. When fashion comes to Nigeria, we take it to the next level. No, go ask anybody. Go ask anybody. Education, the same thing. Nigerians, when they get into education, they go to the far end of it. Anything we do, we go to the far end of it. We just are a little bit intense. Nigerian people here, hello. And that's why you find Nigeria everywhere on earth. You can find them anywhere, So what we need to do is to begin to engage, this religious leader. But unfortunately, these people are not going to just engage with us because they have, I don't want to use the word fanatics. They will not listen to you. Jide Macaulay was persecuted. He had to flee. He had to leave the country because nobody was going to, in fact, he was facing death threats because he was preaching and he was using Jesus. And people thought as homosexual, why would you mention the word Jesus? In January this year, when I wrote my story about how I came out, I ended with the book of Romans, and I quoted the book of Romans that what shall separate us from the love of God? And it is a truth, because the love of God is for all his children, that if God is a man, because they made us to believe he's a man. Unfortunately, for most people who came at me on that post that went viral in Nigeria and most part of Africa, the reason why they were fighting that post was not because I came out as gay, it was because I quoted the Bible. That's bizarre. They were like, why would you quote the Bible? You are gay. Gay people are not meant to quote the Bible because it is an abomination in itself that you're using the Bible. So when you look at this, you begin to ask yourself, where do we start this conversation? I used to be very anti-religion when I came out from religion because religion was very destructive to me. I was with it, I was in it, I did everything. But when I look at it, when I first came out, there's a time in your life as an activist when you want to really fight. I came out, I would write anything against religion. I would just say, but later on I realized we needed to build some empathy with these people. So I started getting to be gentle, but even at that, it didn't work. People are still going to come at you and say, you're going to hell because you're gay or so I don't know what to do. I think it's a complex issue. And if we're going to start that, Nigerian loves money. Get these people, these pastors to New York for a meeting and fly them in, have a conference with them. Maybe they're going to begin to listen. It's the truth. Because they will not change their belief system, which is, I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It is. Thanks.
Thank you very much. My name is Wale Ajibade. You represent African Views Organization. It's great to see you, Wainana, Salina, Kende, good lady. Thank you so much for what you're doing. I wanted to just reiterate what the lady asked before in regards to religion. And I think maybe if we look at it from another perspective, it might be helpful just to grapple with it, because based on my work, we need to strengthen whatever type of defense that's coming from the ground, which is very small. The only spark we see is in Uganda and a little bit of South Africa. Now, from your defense, I believe you were saying that bring this pastor to the United States and maybe they'll learn something. But it's important to know that it is actually the evangelicals from the United States specifically who went to Africa, not just West Africa, East Africa, all over Africa Central, to perpetrate this strategy. As you know, he who rules the human heart rules the world, their world in this sense. And I remember the case that was made to Museveni in order for that law to pass, which I suspect is probably the same thing that was done in Nigeria. And as you mentioned, it was a Christmas gift, which is a dead giveaway. So I think maybe it's important to really take a good look at religion and see how you can begin to grapple with that, at least recognize that they are the main adversary. Now, that's just one issue.
We're running out of time, though.
Absolutely. I also, just to stretch it to South Africa, you mentioned curative rape, and I'm familiar with corrective rape, but is that the same issue?
Same.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it. And so what type of defense is there on the ground that we can support from here? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take the 2 more questions so that we can end. Yeah? Do you want to go ahead?
Hi, my name is Vichy, and I'm from Namibia, but I went to high school in Cape Town, South Africa. So the first time I encountered a gay couple was 2 men, one dressed more feminine and the other was more masculine. So over the years, the big question that people always asked was, in a gay couple or in a lesbian couple, who's the man and who's the woman? And so I guess my question is, you know, we have these sort of ideas of masculinity and femininity, and you can either be one or the other. And so do you think maybe in African culture, where we're so strong about what a woman is and what a man is, do you think maybe that could also stem from that? And if so, how do we correct that, or how do we change that?
Thank you. And then a last question.
My name is Michael. I'm from Nigeria. I just thank you very much, Kenny, and both of you guys are my great idols. My questions are actually on when we talk about vision, and showing ourselves as African queer and African gay men in the media or in social media. As Africans, what kind of, looking from outside, what kind of vision do you want to see? Like you mentioned, like you want to see apart from discrimination and homophobia pictures, you want to see yourself as a queer man, or a picture of 2 gay men naked or 2 lesbians naked. What kind of message do you think Africans will see from that? You talked about when people see those pictures of positivity or 2 lesbians and being naked. I'm thinking that from the West, yes, they will see something different, but an African man, an African heterosexual man will see something different entirely. It will see you're promoting homosexuality by showing such pictures. And at the same time, it's by showing ourselves, showing our community out there, but at the same time, it's between being negative and being positive. What kind of thing do you want to see when we showcase such pictures of the world, or to Africans, to a Nigerian man, to a village man in Nigeria, you'll see 2 gay men naked or 2 women naked. What kind of thing you think they will see when they see that?
They will see human beings in love.
So, Zanele, as you're answering it, these are your last comments, I think, because we're going to run out of time.
Cool. To be honest, we just want to change the systems in place, because most of the time it's like we one thing. I was trying to do away with the negativity, which is why I said we need to create a balance. And I didn't say naked, I said intimacy, which applies to everybody. We all believe in love. We all love women, in my case, and then men love women, sure. To tell the truth, we have images that are dominating our lives that pass on wrong messages, which is why I said we need to create those positive images that speaks to us first, because we can't always rely on mainstream images that do not necessarily portray who we are. And we cannot always rely on mainstream media deciding on what should be in the covers of the magazines. And when the mainstream media talks about health, it's really not my reality. You have seen a number of images of advertisements of like a woman maybe showcasing her beautiful body, and obviously when you read that image, it cannot be labeled as a woman who happened to love other women, as if I don't use those products that are used by the other women. So I just wanted to say, we create these images, how you want to see them as a straight person or the fellow Africans should be negotiated, but I won't always be thinking of who is looking at that image and what for. Depends who's the consumer. I'm producing from my community, and I'm not doing anybody a favor. This is about our lives, and we have a right to claim that right to be seen in that positive way. we are at work, we're working. We want to change the history. We want to change politics of how we are represented. We want to change how people look at us as we exist in different spaces. We use the same product. We pay the same taxes. When somebody collects our money, they don't say, don't collect the pink dollar, the pink rand, whatever. It's the same money. So it just becomes too deep and political in that way. When I produce, I hardly think of mainstream. Instead, what I do, I want to change how the mainstream looks at us. We want to change the literature. We want to change the history books. We want to change geographical areas that are there that says that queers could cross these boundaries, or we only exist once a year when there's gay pride. We are here 365 days. Therefore, nobody is doing anybody a favor. We are working.
Binyavanga.
I'm not saying anything after she said that.
She said it all. The sister said it all. The sister said it all.
That's what's
Okay,
I want to add.
Yeah, I just want to say that we're in different space and time between South Africa and Nigeria. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to be sensitive to the people we're talking about. South Africa's democracy is different from Nigeria's democracy. We are just experiencing democracy for the first time after a long time. And so I wish we could say, just the way she said, oh, we need to live our life, we need to do this, we need to do that. You do that in Nigeria, in the morning you're gone. You know, and that's what happened to David Kido in Uganda. That's what happened to a few other people. So I think as activists, we need to balance, you know, this dynamics of culture wherever we find ourselves. But I'm for speaking out, I'm for visibility. I know a lot of gay, queer people who are like, no, you can't speak out. But I think I agree that we need to be visible, but we need to be sensitive to the culture around us so that we can include, not exclude. Because a lot of time as activists, we fight a lonely fight where we try to say, it's all about my voice, I want to talk. But we need to get allies. We need to get people with us because we can't fight this battle all by ourselves. But yes, we need to do our stories. We need to tell it the way it's supposed to be with no apologies to anyone.
Of course. Thank you. I think it's quite evident at the end of this discussion that we have a lot more questions that we want to ask, and ways in which I think we are experiencing the nature of African democracies is very different. The possibilities that exist in different spaces are different. The resources we may have as well, whether those are human resources or financial resources or political resources in terms of the kinds of allies we can draw on, are very different across this diverse continent. But I do think that what's exciting and fresh is that we're in a moment of rewriting. And all of you are part of that process. So thank you very much for the work that you do. I hope that you will all buy books that are outside. Wait for Kahinde's memoir to come out. I think it'll be really interesting. Go and see Zaneli's exhibition in Brooklyn, and follow Binyavanga, who writes very beautifully about Africa and its daily politics, not just on queer politics, but all kinds of challenges to the project of naming ourselves as African.
Thank you.
And
very much for the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the panel, and thank you all for coming. Thank you.